The movie begins with a man named Pete Koslow. He used to be a soldier, but now he worked with the FBI as an informant. His job was to help the FBI catch bad guys. One day, he got a special mission. Pete had to pretend to be a drug dealer and get close to a group of criminals from Poland. The leader of this gang was a big shot named Richard Klimek. Pete's goal was to gather evidence against him and put him behind bars. To do this, Pete made a plan with his FBI boss, Agent Erica Wilcox. They decided to set up a trap for Klimek at the Polish consulate. Pete would carry a bag full of drugs, and they would catch Klimek in the act. Pete was given a secret listening device, so the FBI could hear everything that was going on. The next day, Pete and a guy named Stasek, who was Klimek's trusted friend, took the bag of drugs to Klimek. But things didn't go as planned. Stasek suddenly changed his mind and said he found a buyer for the drugs. Pete couldn't stop him because he didn't want to blow his cover. Back with the FBI, Erica was getting worried. She thought something was wrong because Pete was not following the plan. The situation was getting tricky, and they didn't know what would happen next. When Pete finally met the buyer, he quickly realized that the man was not a real buyer, but an undercover police officer who wanted to arrest them. Pete tried to get the officer to leave so that Stasek wouldn't harm him, but the officer got upset and showed his badge to everyone. This made Stasek angry, and he killed the officer right away. Meanwhile, Erica heard the gunshots and realized that the policeman was dead. She had no choice but to pull her team out of the ambush mission and leave Pete behind. Pete was then taken to Klimek, who blamed him for the mess. Because a policeman was killed, Klimek's drug business was in danger, and he wanted Pete to take the blame and go to prison to run the drug business from there. At first, Pete refused because he didn't kill the policeman, but Klimek threatened to harm his wife and daughter if he didn't do as he was told. In the end, Pete had no choice but to obey Klimek's orders. Meanwhile, Stasek and his men disposed of the policeman's body by throwing it into the river. Shortly after these events, Pete had a meeting with Erica and her boss, Keith Montgomery, at a hidden place. Erica explained to him that he would still be working as an FBI informant, even while in prison, to gather evidence against Klimek's drug ring. In return, Pete could be released early if he could provide valuable information about Klimek's drug operation from inside the prison. The FBI was eager to put Klimek behind bars, but this meant Pete had to stay in prison. Pete felt really upset that the FBI had essentially sent him to prison to get information about the Klimek drug network. Keith reminded him to think about his family because there was no way out of this situation. On the other side of the story, Detective Edward Grenz from the NYPD started investigating the murder of his officers who had posed as drug buyers. He suspected the Polish mafia's involvement. Edward returned to the crime scene and checked the security camera footage, which showed Pete in the area. He immediately ordered his team to find out more about Pete. After learning about Pete's background, he believed that Pete was the one responsible for killing his officers. Edward quickly issued an arrest warrant for Pete for the murder of an undercover police officer during a mission. After Pete got arrested, Detective Edward went to talk to Erica and Keith. He wanted to know why Pete was now working as an FBI informant. Edward thought the FBI had purposely sent Pete to prison to investigate something related to the murder of his officers. However, neither Erica nor Keith revealed any more details about their plan to catch the drug lord Klimek. They also denied knowing about the murder of Edward's officers. So, Edward decided to investigate on his own because he was determined to find out who was responsible for his men's deaths. Inside the prison, Pete was welcomed by members of the Klimek drug network who would help him distribute drugs behind bars. But Pete was being closely watched by a prison warden named Sluitt, who had been suspicious of him from the moment he arrived. The next day, Pete started discreetly passing drugs from one prisoner to another, trying not to get caught by the prison guards. It turned out that sales were booming that day, and they made a good amount of money. On the other side of things, Edward paid a visit to Pete's wife, Sophia, hoping to find some clues about Pete's case. He had assured her that he could help get Pete out of prison because he was certain Pete wasn't the killer. But Sophia, following Pete's warning not to trust anyone else, chose not to reveal anything to the detective. Unable to persuade her, Edward handed her his business card and told her to call him if she ever needed assistance. Later, Edward went to the prison and tried to communicate with Pete through one of the inmates who was his informant. Back at the FBI headquarters, Keith gave orders to Erica to eliminate Pete and halt all their operations aimed at catching Klimek. Keith was worried that Edward's ongoing investigation could jeopardize their careers at the FBI. If Edward and the NYPD found out that they knew who was responsible for the murder of the police officer, both of them could end up in jail. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Pete had a run-in with a gang leader named Phelps, who controlled the drug trade behind bars. Phelps was upset because he felt Pete had been too bold by selling drugs in his territory. Phelps and his group, with the help of the corrupt Sluit, decided to torture Pete and planned to kill him. Under the intense pain, Pete finally admitted that he was an undercover FBI informant who was trying to expose Klimek's drug ring. When Phelps heard this, he immediately ordered his men to stop hurting Pete. Pete then asked for Phelps's help in uncovering anyone involved with Klimek's drug operation, and Phelps agreed. Meanwhile, Erica had already given orders to have Pete killed in prison. However, Pete, always ready for danger, had kept a knife nearby for self-defense. After getting information about the Klimek drug network from Phelps, Pete tried to contact Erica so he could be released from prison. Unfortunately, Erica, following Keith's orders to stop the mission to capture Klimek and kill Pete, did not respond. With the FBI unable to assist him, Pete decided to reach out to Detective Edward and revealed everything to him. He also called his wife, Sophia, and asked her to give Edward an audio recording of his conversation with Erica, which he had recorded just in case. This evidence would help the police with their investigation. Somewhere else, Klimek found out that Pete was cooperating with Phelps in prison. Furious about this, Klimek ordered Stasek and his gang to go after Pete's wife and daughter. When Sophia saw the thugs outside her house, she quickly called Edward for help. Stasek and his men captured Sophia and her daughter, locking them in a room, and even planned to set their house on fire with gasoline. Upon receiving Sophia's distress call, Edward rushed to the scene and confronted Stasek's men. While trying to rescue Sophia and her daughter upstairs, Edward got shot in the leg, forcing him to make a hasty escape. As Stasek came down the stairs with Pete's daughter as a hostage, ready to kill Edward, Sophia managed to free herself and shot Stasek, causing him to tumble down the stairs. Edward finally took down Stasek. Not only did Klimek want to harm Sophia and her daughter, but he also ordered his men to kill Pete in prison. When Pete entered a room, one of Phelps' men signaled to him that he was in immediate danger. Pete quickly checked his bed and realized his knife was gone. Shortly after, a Polish gangster attacked him, putting his life in danger. Fortunately, Pete managed to overpower his attacker. However, when the guards found out about the fight, they targeted Pete. In a desperate move, Pete had to take Sluit hostage and use him as a shield to flee from the prison guards. He knocked Sluit unconscious and took him to the top of the prison tower, where there were many pipes and gas cylinders, and hid there. Meanwhile, Keith and the FBI surrounded the prison, ready to kill Pete. They positioned their troops and prepared to shoot Pete as soon as Keith gave the order. On the other hand, using his skills from his time as a United States Special Forces sniper, Pete devised a plan to escape from the prison. He moved a gas cylinder to a spot that would make it easier for him to make his escape. Afterward, Pete switched clothes with Sluit and strategically positioned the CO2 tank behind them. He woke Sluit up and made it look like Sluit was holding him hostage, tricking the sniper into targeting Sluit instead of him. Just as the sniper was about to shoot, Pete slightly moved to dodge the bullet and hit the gas cylinder, causing a massive explosion. Shortly after the explosion, Erica arrived at the scene. When Pete was about to be taken away in an ambulance, Erica, recognizing him in the prison warden's clothes, got into the same ambulance. Surprisingly, Erica wanted to help Pete. She secretly handed him a gun, allowing him to subdue everyone in the ambulance, pretend to harm Erica, and then escape. A while later, Pete planned to reunite with Sophia and his daughter. However, he quickly realized that there were many undercover cops waiting to arrest him as soon as he showed up. For their safety, he decided to stay away and not see his wife and daughter for the time being. The movie concludes with a scene showing Erica and Keith having a conversation on a boat. Eventually, the NYPD arrests Keith after Erica records his incriminating words on wiretaps, which openly ordered her to kill Koslow to cover up his actions. Edward and Erica then team up to help Pete get out of this situation and protect his family. The movie ends. So the moral of the story is when life gets explosive, remember, it's always handy to have a backup wardrobe for your daring escapes. Fashion and survival go hand in hand.